At least let me introduce the brother on the screen with us. Joining us now is Torraine Walker. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of Context Media Group, a news and information company that produces and distributes documentaries, in-depth interviews, and multimedia content. He describes himself as an observer, a journalist, and filmmaker and commentator. Torraine, thanks so much for joining us. How are you, man?
I'm good, brother. Thank you for having me on.
My pleasure, man. You walked right into the shenanigans. I know we got a lot of serious news to cover, but I was going to say, y'all need to not have those Alexas, the CIA sitting right in y'all kitchen, Rebecca. Like, those affairs listening.
Well, first off, let me say, Torraine is family. Okay. Yes. Remember when we met him, 2 years ago at the Black Panther? It
had to be more than 2 years. Is it only
It's like 2 years. Oh no, it's 3 years. 3 years. That's
been
crazy.
A minute, yeah.
And we've been Twitter family ever since. It was one of those things like we gonna meet up. We gonna meet up.
And it was pretty dope. We all and Torraine, you were there. We were all there. We all got the exclusive passes for the media through our mutual friend, and it was like great connecting with you. But you've been super busy since then. You've started a media company. You've been in the streets with your activism. Tell us about the media company and your evolution from being an independent journalist to starting your own company.
All right. Well, that really came about because I was originally a featured journalist who was doing freelancing, and I was writing for people like the Huffington Post. I did stuff for Vice, Fusion, things like that. And I came into that around the time that protest became a really hot story in mainstream media. There was, Ferguson and Baltimore and all these things were happening. And I was feeling the stories about that stuff. But what I was noticing was that I had to filter my points of view, and I had to filter what I was saying through editors who didn't really understand the culture, and they didn't really understand the mentality of people who were dealing with these issues. So I said, you know what? We live in the information age. We also live in the age of technology. I can take what I know and reach the people I want to talk to directly and let them speak. So that's why I started Context Media. And so far, it's been pretty good. I've done exclusive interviews with activists. I've done a documentary. I do regular interviews with people. So far, it's been pretty good. It's been building.
That's what's up. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go on, Rebecca.
Really good, guys. I just need to know there is a lag. Okay, Benjamin Dixon. But yes, sir. And it's really good to hear that because I know we know the whole idea or the life, because we've been about that life where we're working for people and we do feel like our voices are put in a box or we're speaking through their lens and not particularly ours because we work for those people colonize us. So, but now that we freed ourselves and we're able to have our voice and empower other people who look like us and bring people on and share the narrative and create that narrative to be actually what it is, it feels good. It feels like we're free. One thing I want to point out that you do on social media is really push it to the edge, right? It could be you're not on the side of all of Black Twitter.
Yeah.
One thing I love about you, and even if I agree or disagree, what you usually do is say, all right, I see that one view, but just because I'm Black on Twitter doesn't mean that I have to agree with Black Twitter. How has that been for you? Because I've seen a lot of people do pushback on you, but you really just walk around like you don't care. You tweet around like you don't care. And I like that.
Yeah, some people love it. Some people hate it, but you're always going to get me. Really what I do is, look, I come from every story and I come from every issue that people talk about from the perspective of being African-American and being a male. Now, that doesn't mean that I disregard other people's issues or I disregard other people's points of view. It's just that when I see something that I feel like is unfair, or I feel like something that's being used, one incident is being used to generalize a whole group of people, whether it's Black men or Black women or Black non-gender conforming people, I always push back against that. We live in an age now where people say a lot of things that they really don't mean because it sounds good and they know they can get a really quick viral tweet off of that. But I really believe in coming with data and I believe in coming with facts and not letting somebody's lived experience, even though it's valid, dictate a whole generation, dictate a whole movement of how people should move. I think it's good to have healthy differences of opinion. I think it's good to debate respectfully. So that's what I try to provide. I don't try to attack anybody. I just say, no, this is what you feel. Okay, cool. Here's the data to back up whatever you feel. Do you have that or not? I usually come with data and people usually run away.
You, I know you're probably following and covering to what extent you can let us know, covering the Derek Chauvin trial. And you began a lot of your career covering the protests and activists. What are your thoughts in terms of us actually getting justice in general, but even specific to this trial? Like, we saw all those 8 minutes and 8.5 minutes, and we have heard nothing but consistent lies from a segment of the media that is trying to undermine us getting quote unquote justice, even at this, even despite seeing the actual video. Where are you coming from in terms of coverage and your thoughts about that trial?
Well, I think one thing that people really have to understand is that the media, at least mainstream media as we know it, is not anybody's friend. And we have to get out of this idea of objectivity in the media, because all media to some degree is slanted one way or the other. That's right. What you see in a lot of mainstream media, especially reporting this particular trial, what you're getting is a lot of narrative that's being fed to the media by police unions and by people who are, quote unquote, on the side of Derek Chauvin. You're not really getting a lot of conversation from people who are affected by this trial. You're not really getting any kind of backstory from people who live in that community, who live in Minneapolis, who know the legacy of police brutality in Minneapolis, and it's a very long legacy. I interviewed a woman by the name of Nikema Armstrong about a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. She was instrumental in helping to organize some of the protests when Philando Castile was killed, and she also helped organize some of the protests that happened in Minneapolis after George Floyd was murdered. You're not really seeing a lot of conversation with these people and people who are on the ground and people who are really affected by this. It's all narrative pushed by police unions, and a lot of media companies are not talking about that. I think that's where the focus needs to be, not just with me. I think people who are independent media or people who really have a vested interest in informing the public need to get in front of that.
Yeah.
No, and that's exactly what we were talking about. It's funny that you mentioned that. It is the police unions putting out a rhetoric out there that is untrue. And what they'll do is try to polish the police officers, right?
Yeah.
Especially the murderer who's, going on trial now. And it's our duty, and that's why it's important, like, to reach out to activists and people to have these conversations. So my question to you is, when you are reaching out to activists, are you looking at their Twitter to see where they're at with the conversation? How do you choose? What's your choosing process for getting the activists to come on your show?
Well, basically what I do is I just try to really just present myself, and introduce people to let them know who I am. And I try to tell them, look, this is who I am. This is what I would like to do. I like to give you a place to be heard. Go back and take a look at my record. And if you are cool with what I've done and you like what I've done, would you like to come on? And overwhelmingly, the response has been pretty positive. I think we have to understand that a lot of people who are involved in activism, who are involved in protests, even outside of street level protests, these people really are at risk. And it's really dangerous sometimes for a lot of them to come to the media and speak, because they don't want to have their voices either completely manipulated to make them seem like they said something that they didn't say, or to be completely edited to the point where the things they want to get across never come across, and you get the narrative of the media outlet. What I try to do is just basically let people speak for themselves. I ask the questions I need to ask, and I let people express themselves, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
And sorry, Ben, one more thing. I asked that question because a lot of people will pose themselves as activists, right? And say they've been following this, and they too will start out with the right story, and then start leaning towards another way. And this is where it gets interesting, because these are the people who are getting into these shows and these platforms. A lot of people aren't vetting and seeing where they were before on the issue. And not to say that people can't change, but some of them actually try to be on the issue this one way because there's money there. Right? If I discuss this right here, the way that it is about George Floyd or police brutality, there's money there. But in actuality, I feel a different kind of way. And a lot of activists have been exposed about these type of things, but yet they're the ones that are getting, and when I say activists, I use that term very loosely for the people that have been given those opportunities in mainstream media.
You actually expose, you talk about that pretty regularly online.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I talk about it. But really what I'm doing is just really, all I'm really doing with that situation, and I know what you're talking about, is just giving voice to people who have really been ostracized and marginalized. There's sort of a thing that's happening right now where, well, it's been going on for a few years, where there's a possibility of getting notoriety by being an activist, or there's a possibility of getting notoriety by being seen as being an activist. They're two totally different things. And I think people don't understand that when there's outrage against injustice, and there's always going to be injustice in this country, unfortunately, as long as the material conditions continue as they are, you're going to see people who come to prominence protesting that injustice. There's nothing that's inherently wrong with coming to prominence by protesting injustice or getting your voice out there to be heard. The problem is, once you get that voice, what do you do with it? Who are you speaking for? Are you speaking for the people you claim to represent, or are you speaking for yourself? That's one of the problems right now. You know, people see that it can be very lucrative to be seen as an activist. You can get onto the speaking circuit. You can get into the nonprofit industrial complex, and then all of a sudden you become a symbol for civil rights, or you become a symbol for protest. But your symbolism and what you're doing may not have anything to do with the people you are claiming to represent. That's the issue. There's been a very prominent issue that's been happening over the past week, where people who feel like they've been marginalized or their issues have been pushed to the side to let other people come to prominence, have been speaking out against that. So I've just been talking about that. I haven't really been on one side or the other. I've just been saying, look, these people have been on the ground for almost a half a decade. You need to talk to them. There's people in other cities who have been on the ground as well. But because they are putting in work, they don't have the media savvy to go to the media everywhere. They don't know who to call. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know how to get themselves into these positions. And they feel like they're being marginalized and left behind, so they want to speak. So that's what's happening.
Yeah. We see that happen all the time, man. And it is they don't have agents. Right. They don't have booking agents that can get them scheduled on all of these mainstream media outlets. And the people who are doing the actual work are putting their lives at risk, like you said. I want to shift gears a little bit, because I know you're also covering the national politics, and you're covering it from the perspective of holding the Biden administration accountable for their promises, but also from the perspective of what the people who advocated for Joe Biden, or even people who reluctantly voted for Joe Biden, what they are doing in terms of that accountability. Where are you at in terms of all this first 100 days of Biden's administration, and not just Biden in general, but like the Democratic Party as a whole?
Unfortunately, I have to say I'm not really surprised by the way things have gone. I knew when the election started, especially after the Senate race in Georgia, there was going to be a full court press in the country and in Georgia to move this conversation into, we got to get Biden elected, because if we don't, the country's not going to survive if he's not elected. And there were a lot of promises made. There was a lot of massaging of the vote, especially the black vote, especially the black woman vote. Now Biden's in office. Now Kamala Harris is the vice president. We have Ossoff, we have Warnock in the Senate. But it seems like all those issues that were forefront to getting them in office have been left on read at this point. You know what I mean? It's like we're seeing a quiet return to the status quo, and back to the quiet status quo that was in place before Trump showed up. And it feels to me like Trump was so much of a lightning rod for people, that he was something that everybody could focus on getting him out. But there hasn't been any real conversation about how do you pay back the people who put you in office at this point. It's been a lot of hurry up and wait. It's been a lot of, well, we got to get around to these other things first before we get to you, even though he signed how many executive orders in the last month and a half. There was a press conference he did a couple of weeks ago. He had a stack of executive orders this high, and very few of them reached out to his constituents that were talked about as putting him in office. I think that's an issue. And I feel like a lot of people who are the quote unquote gatekeepers of Black punditry and the gatekeepers of Black politics allow that to happen because they're worried about their jobs and they're worried about getting a position in that cabinet. And you can't really serve the people if you're not connected to the people. It's bigger than your job, and it has to be addressed. If he's the president now, he has to really be held accountable. As these people kept saying, we're going to hold him accountable once he gets in office. He's in office now. Let's hold him accountable. And I don't think that's been happening.
Let me tell you something. One thing about it is that I'm right there with you. I speak about holding the president accountable as in the vice president accountable, because these two people were put in place, whether we liked it or not, whether we liked them or not, but we knew that this was going to be better. We believed that it was going to be better. And personally, they are, right? But in a sense, they are still doing. Where are they when trouble hits? We haven't seen them. We haven't seen them stand strong enough and things like that. So I'm right with you on that. Another person that we have to hold accountable. I want to get your opinion on this one. Where Cuomo, right? We have Governor Cuomo, who was so loved at the beginning of the pandemic. They were all saying, he needs to be president. He needs to be all this and that. Now we have women speaking up against him about sexual harassment and his, and then the news about how he handled the COVID numbers and hiding information. So what do you think that he should step down?
Yes. I think at the very least, there needs to be a thorough investigation about what's going on. And there needs to also be a reckoning with a lot of people in the media, because a lot of what you're seeing right now, and again, a lot of this conversation, a lot of this idolization of Cuomo happened is because, let's face it, he has a brother who works on CNN. And there was a lot of conversation about conflicts of interest, about reporting on him or not reporting on him. You have to be able to hold everybody accountable. You can't just say that what Trump did was bad, which was bad. The Trump administration, there was a lot of nepotism. There was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of things that went on that still need to be investigated, need to be looked at. But you can't put all that on one side of the aisle and then look at everything that's going on the other side of the aisle and say, well, that's us. We'll downplay that. We won't talk about that. If you're going to stand on a moral grounding, you have to be moral for everybody. You can't let it go from one to the other. It's unpleasant. It's hard to deal with, but it's the truth.
Speaking of Cuomo and his brother, Dwayne, do you have that clip from C4 Friday night? Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon. I just want to get your opinion on this.
They kikied.
They were
just looking out of the window, watching the asphalt grow, thinking how it all looks hand-me-down.
How do you know the words to Good Times?
You know I'm black on the inside. So,
good times, anytime you need a baby.
So Florida, who, by the way, was a hugely educated, I think she was a Yale.
I didn't mean to throw you into the deep end like that, bro. But this is what you're talking about. Like this, the media. Just talk about that for a second, man. Especially in context of CNN and his brother covering for the New York governor, and now Don Lemon. It's just a level of absurdity in our mainstream media that is excused at a level that I really want to know what you think.
First of all, did he actually say that I'm black on the inside?
And he said I'm black on the inside. He did. He said I'm black on the inside, and then tried to quickly cover it up by saying Florida. And we're like, we heard that.
That's what he said.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? This is the level of media coverage that we have in the United States right now on a mainstream level. You know what I mean? If you know what, man, I say this all the time to myself. Edward R. Murrow and Ed Bradley are turning in their graves, man. With the stuff that we're dealing with right now. We don't really have media. We don't even have a media industry or a journalism industry in America anymore. We have a PR firm, and it's just two sides of the same PR firm, whether it's Fox, whether it's CNN. And the public is the worst for this. I'm not saying that everything has to be stayed. You can't lighten it up and you can't have fun on your job, but you can't lose sight of the fact that your main reason for being there is to inform the public. And we're not getting that anymore. We're getting a lot of water carriers, and we're getting a lot of people who are giving you a lot of fluff, and you're not really helping out the people. And this is why we're dealing with a lot of uninformed people right now. It's amazing. It's really fascinating. We got to get out of this idea that just having somebody who looks like you on TV or in politics or in any kind of punditry or in activism is really going to help you. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? We have to get out of the identity politics to the point where we're just focused so much on identity that we don't look at anything else.
Absolutely. And to that end, that's why your media company and what you're doing is so important. Torraine Walker, founder and editor of Context Media Group. Can you tell everyone how they can get up with you and where they should find your work?
Absolutely. You can find my work on contextmediagroup.com. You can also find me on social media, Torraine Walker on Twitter, and Context Media on Instagram, Facebook. Everything's all Context Media Group or Context Media. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. Hey, brother, thanks so much for joining us. We want to have you back anytime that you're available, covering any of your stories. We appreciate the work that you're doing.
No, thank you. I'll even shave next go around.